So I feel so full already of ideas and thoughts that all of which require responses. So I think the word thing is a very, very interesting one, actually. I wonder if we use too many of them, and whether it bogs us down and, stops us scratching that thing that is sort of called reality. I think I want to put a claim in for liking what Kant says about reality, that you can't approach it directly, and that we see everything through this sort of phony space-time thing. And I think words might stop us doing that. When I was a publisher, we did quite a lot of publishing around the arts therapies, and I think there's something very interesting about how the non-verbal modalities reach parts that words can't reach. So art therapy and music therapy in particular with people in mental distress are extraordinarily effective and good communicative modalities for people that don't feel able to put what they're worried about into words. So I think that's just a sort of interesting sideline in a way. I think poetry, and I'm stepping on much more, I'm trying not to step on feet, but it does seem to use language in a way that both tears it to pieces in a constructive way and reaches something that you can't reach in ordinary, everyday language. I think that's very interesting how it does that, and it brings the spirit alive in lots of ways, I think. I do, this whole thing about words, it's just, I've for many years been following a Taoist practice, and I suppose what is interesting to me about that is how it parallels many other ways of attempting to reach the spirit in the West in particular. It's quite astonishing how many of the same rules pertain, that you're trying to reach a place of stillness in which something happens. And that seems to me to be finding a way to a reality that you cannot reach any other way. It's through practice and through discarding things. I think I wouldn't like to describe it as getting rid of the ego, because I think that's the wrong way to me of thinking about it. So the Chinese are very interesting, actually, because they start from a place that looks very, very as if they don't know the difference between themselves and the outside world. And everything is very full of, mystical animals and how the world is made up of 5 different energies and all of this sort of thing. And then you begin to realize that actually it's very highly codified, and these are all metaphors. And that you may have seen that very odd diagram that looks a bit like a fetus, but it has mountains at the top, and it has sort of odd things like water wheels and a man with a plow and stars and things like that. And this is the Chinese codification of how doing a contemplative practice of a very particular and trained sort with special breathing and other things creates a different being within you. And I mean, I'm amazed by how they actually do this in a way that is so specific. Who sorted that out? How did they reach this common language to speak about it? How did they work out where the meridians in the body are? They all seem to agree on them, and yet you can't touch them or see them. And this dates from a very long time ago. But if you look at how that matches the Western approach, you start to look at things like the perennial philosophy and the hesychastic tradition, which was sort of restored in, I think it was Gregory of Palamas. Is that right, Mark? On Mount Athos, and that again is about stillness, finding stillness within. And the whole process of elimination of quietness, of stillness, of, again, breathing exercises and practices that create this phenomenon. And I begin to wonder if those sort of rules, which seem to be common to anyone who really is looking for the thing beyond themselves, is actually the way to connecting mind and body. I mean, the Chinese start absolutely from the body. You have to clean that out first and clear all your meridians and so on. But then you reach this other place, which is exactly the same place as we in the West think of as a place of emptiness that can be filled by understanding, and of an understanding of your place in the universe and of your place in relation to other people. And I think this is what Mark and Gary were talking about earlier, about reconnecting the mind, the body, the community, becoming part again of the outside world. I don't know. It's just, for me, that's a very, very personal perspective, actually. I think, can everybody do it? It rather seems that they can't. So what do you do about that? I don't know. We seem to be living in a world where language is becoming cruder and cruder and cruder. This thing about Trump having a vocabulary of about 500 words is, heaven help us. And the sort of crudeness of behaviour which is now acceptable. This is such a far removed thing from the subtleties of poetry and of art and of what is conveyed through looking sideways at it. I think, I'd like to just finish by coming back to this thing of the arts. What is it they do? How do we understand them? There's some part of the mind that is not rationally comprehending it. And yet, I think all the arts, when they're really good, pare away all the rubbish that we fill our lives with. And they say things that are very clear and speak to you in a way that you just can't do any other way, which is why I admire poetry so much. So I'm going to finish there.
Thank you, Jessica.